Good morning. Happy Wednesday. I hope that you're having a great week, and I hope that you had a chance to, of course, on Monday, just go out and download your module, read your email, see what's coming this week. Remember, yesterday was your first day of your school week. Technically, it's day one of your work week, part of that. So you had your first assignment yesterday of the week, and that was to read Night, or at least the excerpt from Night, that memoir that I did attach for you. It's also in your online collections textbook, and I put it in a PDF for you. Today, that's what I want to dig into. I want to dig into that piece of literature just like we would in class. I want to walk you through the nuances of the language that he is intentionally choosing and using, and how that really creates tone in this particular piece of literature. So today we're going to walk through the difference between tone and mood. And then at the end of this lesson, I'm hoping that you'll have a better understanding, and that will help clarify the assignment that you've been working on. The assignment, remember, day one assignment, so yesterday's assignment isn't due until Wednesday, so tonight, at midnight, 11:59 p.m. in Schoology. That gives you a day and a half to work on it, or, depending on when you downloaded that. And then today you'll start a new assignment, which will be assignment number 2, but it's not due until tomorrow at 11:59 p.m. And that will be on the word choice, on the actual vocabulary and words that he's choosing. So let's go ahead and get started. When you go to submit your assignment in Schoology, it's you have 3 choices, and it just depends on how you want to organize your computer and your assignments and your folders. But you can just watch this little video here, right there. If you click on that, I created a how-to video yesterday so that you can go in and submit your assignments on Schoology. It is different than when we took those little quick quizzes. The quiz just pops right up, you answer them. The assignments, there's usually multiple questions or activities involved in the assignment. So you submit those. One of the 3 ways that I talk about in here, there's primarily 2 that we'll use that are easiest for us, since we didn't download any apps or anything into our program. Let's get started. I want to go ahead and just I want to bring up the piece here so you can see the piece of literature that we're going to be discussing. This was what's in your textbook and your online collections book when you logged in. It's also what I attached as a PDF, so you had a couple choices. It's a piece from the author who actually survived a concentration camp. And what you probably already read about Wiesel is that he chose to write this. This is called a memoir. So it's a picture, it's a glimpse, it's a moment in his life that he's capturing to share with us. And it's different than an autobiography. And we did talk about that in class. So an autobiography, is the whole story of their own life. This is a moment in their life that they are choosing that was usually either monumental or in some way shaped who they are, something that they feel that if they share it with the world or their reader or their audience, it's going to leave an impression in them and maybe change their thinking or make an impact on the reader's life. So they choose it intentionally. You will be next week working on your own memoirs. So I'd like you to be thinking, as you're reading this and as you're working on this particular memoir this week, I want you thinking about your story. What is it, that has shaped who you are? And there's many things, of course, that are all part of that. But I want you thinking about if you could pinpoint a moment that created in you one of think about when we talked about our 5 core values. Is there something you can think about in your life that really created one of those? Or maybe a character trait you have. Maybe it's funny, maybe it was serious, maybe it was scary. It just depends on, can you remember that moment? And I'm going to ask you to tell a glimpse of that next week, not to anyone else, but to me. But I want you thinking about that. So let's look at his memoir. Let's go ahead and work on what the author was doing intentionally in this piece. I want to start off by having you go ahead and open up your English notebooks to the literature section. You have a lot of notes in there, and usually, we've been creating, if you remember, our strategic reading notes, so they're all leveled And we won't be able to do that, as like we do usually together with the level 1, 2, and the 3 analysis. But I want you in that section because I'm going to talk about here. I'm going to give you some notes to take until you'll be able to use when you take your quiz, and then when you write your own memoir, you'll be able to use these notes that I'm going to give you. So I'm going to give you a minute or a few seconds to go ahead and open up that notebook to the literature section. If you don't have your notebook at home because it's at school still in your locker, then just get out a blank piece of paper or even just take notes, on your computer as you're listening and watching. So go ahead and do that. I am going to turn off the camera because I'm going to put up the Google Slides like I do in class. So just give me a second to switch that out here. And beginning with when we look at tone versus mood, I want you to know and understand that some pieces, it's really hard to differentiate often. People get it confused all the time, even at the college level, because they both deal with emotion. Tone and mood are both they both have to involve emotion, and that's what they're trying to elicit, and they use one to create the other. But they are very different in the sense of their intent. Okay, so the mood it's the reader's response. So think about mood as a reader or an audience. If you're listening to a speaker, it is, what emotion is being evoked here? What is it that that you are feeling? What is the atmosphere of the piece? What effect is it having on the audience? This is often done by setting an imagery. That's how we usually pull out the mood. Think about it as the heart, okay? How the reader feels when they read or listen. It's the emotional response. Oh, I see I have a spelling error there. Okay. But it's how the reader feels. So mood is reader. Here are some words that we often use when we're talking about when we're really setting mood. Okay. It might be depressing. It could be calm. It could be comical, dark, foreboding, joyful, intense, lighthearted, optimistic. Those are all mood words. Tone is the author. So if mood is the reader, tone is the author. It is the author's intent. It's their specific attitude that they have toward the subject they're writing about, toward the characters they're writing about, or even toward the audience sometimes. It is conveyed most often, and we're going to talk about how our author does it in this piece here in just a minute, but it's done by word choice, details, often context clues. It's going to choose very specific words. The author intentionally chooses very specific words and then puts them into context. We've worked on that all year. And how is a word used in a sentence? The author can use the connotation. That's a positive or a negative feeling about the word. Remember, denotation is the dictionary definition. Connotation is, how the author is using it in a positive or negative way. Look at how the author uses punctuation. Are they putting everything in all caps? Are they putting lots of exclamation marks after things? Are they using dashes or fragments? That is all helping to deliver the tone of the piece. It is often the author's opinion or their bias based on their experience will come through in their tone. So think of mood as reader and tone as author. And the words that we often can associate with tone are, enthusiastic, encouraging. It could be cynical. And that was one of our vocab words that we had, right? Last piece of literature. It can be formal, emphatic. It could be condescending, sarcastic. Pleading is one. So they're just different words that we associate when we're talking about tone. Here's a sample. If the passage from the literature says, Charlie surveyed the classroom adults, congratulating himself for snatching the higher test grade, the smug smirk on his face growing brighter and brighter as he confirmed the inferiority of his peers. If we're talking about mood, we can tell that, the reader here, or the writer here, excuse me, is trying, to set this gleeful mood. Charlie, the subject of our sentence, the subject of our literature here, is gleeful. He has like this sense of superiority about him. You can hear he's pretty happy about this. The tone, however, that's created is very cynical, almost sarcastic. It's exaggerated. Think about the word choice the author uses here: smug, okay, inferiority. Those are important because they're helping the author to deliver that tone. Here's another example. He approached the task with sheer determination. He'd studied his plans carefully, spent hours preparing, and was sure of his approach. The hours he spent practicing were grueling and exhausting, but he was ready. This was the year he would win the pie eating contest at school. So if we're looking first at our tone here, we can tell that the tone that, look at the words: sheer determination, carefully, preparing, grueling, practicing, exhausting. Those are all the author describing this very serious or intense, focused tone. It's formal. But if we look at the mood, it's a pie eating contest at school. So it's going to be sort of informal or playful. It's silly. It's, that's the mood that's set here. Pie eating contests at school are not often very serious endeavors. Let's look at night. So what I'm going to dig into here in a little bit, I'm going to be taking you to some very specific places in the text. And that will be talking about how our author, Weisel, or Weasel, depending on how you pronounce that, where you're from, he is using very intentional strategies, rhetorical strategies that we worked on earlier in the year: repetition, parallelism, allusion. He alludes to the Bible. These, the people that are the characters in here, the real, actual people from a real event. He uses a biblical allusion here to the Bible because these are Jews. These are Jewish people that had believed in an Old Testament God. He uses irony, which we've talked about earlier. He uses verbal irony specifically to say one thing but really mean the opposite. So we're going to dig into that here in just a minute. From night, what you're going to see when we look at word choice creating tone. Another word for word choice in the world of literature, a lot of literary critics or people that analyze literature refer to it as diction. Okay, diction is just the words that are used. We talk about it as a word choice often. Word choice, or the diction in this piece, is creating tone. I'm taking them right out of the literature here. The tone of fear or dread can be conveyed from this passage. One more hour, then we would know the verdict: death or reprieve. So that tone that's being set here, because of the words death, because of reprieve, one more hour. That's not even a full sentence, right? I mean, look at how they're using words and style to create this particular tone of fear and dread. There's another one. This is a tone of despair, and that's a feeling of helplessness. He felt time was running out. He was speaking rapidly. He wanted to tell me so many things. His speech became confused. His voice was choked. You can feel that. Look at the words they're using: time running out, rapidly, confused speech, choked voice. Let's look at an upbeat and encouraging tone. Pay attention to the word choice in this selection of the diction. Were there still miracles on this earth? He was alive. He had passed the second selection. He had still proved his usefulness. Again, we're seeing this sense of maybe hope. There are miracles. He passed. He's useful. So I want you thinking about that as we look at this particular PDF that I'm going to pull up this from down at the bottom here, but you have it in your online textbook as well. So when we talk about, let's start off with some of those rhetorical strategies that I was talking about. The verbal irony, it starts right off in the very beginning here. The SS offered us a beautiful present for the new year. Whoops. I want you to think about that for a minute. Beautiful present. When we think of a concentration camp, or when we are thinking of something as devastating as World War II, we wouldn't often really be referring to anything at that time being a beautiful present. So these words are what we call verbal irony, because he's saying something really positive here. But in all actuality, he's really, referencing that this is going to be, they're facing a selection. I mean, somebody is going to die. And that is not a beautiful present. Some will live and some will die. This is a very grim, ugly prospect. This is not a beautiful gift. This is actually the opposite. So that's some verbal irony there to show you an example. Let's move now to, let's move down. If you follow me, I'm on page 308 right now, and that is the same for you as well. We're going to look at the word choice. When I was talking about word choice, I used this one in the lesson example when we're talking about a reprieve, this one more hour. With this word here, death or reprieve, that means almost like I get a second chance. I get a break. So I can see that I didn't just say death or life. I'm saying that, I get one more chance. So I don't know what's to come. It also gives me this sense really of a reprieve means I might have to go through it again. It's just a brief break. So that lets me know really the tense of the piece as well. Well, let's keep looking down here. I did talk about allusion as a strategy. And so there is some allusions throughout this piece that you'll continue to see when we're talking about the Bible. And I'll get to that on page 309. Just so you know, just for a really vocabulary, a Blockeltest, I'm not exactly sure how to say that, Blockeltest is someone that in the concentration camps, he was a Jew that was assigned by the Germans to lead the Jews. So he is put into position by the Nazis to lead in that particular part of the camp. And so think about how hard that would be to be assigned that position. Like, you are a Jew, but you're controlling all of your fellow Jews. You've been assigned, by the Nazis to pass down really their judgment. I mean, you are giving directions all the time, and that often leads to the death of your peers. So that is this. Also think about these characters, because that's helping set really he's creating tone here, which will set the mood, right? I want you to also think about a reprieve. Who's giving the reprieve? I mean, yes, the Nazis are giving the reprieve, but often it's the Blockeltest is giving the reprieve. That's just a brief, like I said, it's just a brief break from punishment. Okay, and this person here has to deliver it and then deal with it, and deliver it and deal with it constantly. Let's move on to that allusion for just a moment here. The allusion, we can note, I want you to see, he was praying. I never suspected that Yossi was religious. I believed the opposite. Here's the allusion. This must be how one stands for the last judgment, right here. Whoops, sorry about that. Okay. The last judgment. This is an allusion. This is a reference to what the Jews would have believed about, God will judge everyone in the end. Okay. So the Nazis will be judged, is what he's saying here, but they are all being judged each and every day. And God's final judgment is supposedly, according to the Jews and their view on biblical prophecy, is that when they die, they'll be put before God, and he will judge everything they've done and everything they've said. But that's also how they feel that the Nazis are, treated, they're at their mercy each and every day. But they allude, this last judgment is this reference to the Bible of God's last judgment. I just want to spend a couple more minutes helping you work through this on some tone. Let's look at, I have my notes here, page 310, I want you to look at. And on page 310, we see this strategy being used right here. I'm on page 310 and I'm looking at, these lines of, I'm going to erase that. Lines where it's just going over and again. You are too skinny. You are too weak. You are too skinny. You are good for the ovens. Okay? So he's repeating this again and again. You are too weak. You are too skinny. This is a very intentional reinforcement of the tone. You think about the connotation of skinny. Okay? If I said someone was thin, that's a little different than being skinny. Skinny can have a different connotation to it. Okay? Depending on how it's used. And he uses skinny and skinny over again, which really has this reference to being weak. So he's getting this mindset here that he is weak, he's not good enough. So he uses that repetition to deliver the tone of despair, that sense of hopelessness. I'm not good enough, of weakness. So think about that being intentionally delivered. There's another really good I have in my notes I want to show you here to help you. Page 311. And so when you read this, you might have passed over some of this the first time around. I don't catch everything the first time I read it, of course. So I want you to look here. I'm on page 311 right now, and I'm up at about like page lines 118-ish. And I put this in the notes so you can always go back and read it. But the bell regulated everything. Let's just start here. The bell. It was already time to part, to go to bed. The bell regulated everything. It gave me orders. I executed them blindly. I hated that bell. Whenever I happened to dream of a better world, I imagined a universe without a bell. So we have this repetition, repeating these specific phrases, these specific words. They are conveying a purpose here, right? I wrote in my notes that it almost is like if you think of a bell sounding like ding, ding, it's almost like he's putting that in there as that dirge of the bell, the bell, the bell, the bell, the bell. You can almost feel it, just that tolling of the bell. And I want you to think about, this also in Life of the Concentration Camp, it's the same thing each and every day. It's the bell. It determined everything. It regulated everything. And so there's a sense of the bell being in control. And then he wants to someday, he can only imagine in a life that there won't be the bell. That's the feeling that it's created in him. And now, as the author, with his tone, he's trying to help you feel that, so that the mood that you walk away with, you might feel almost angry at the bell, or you might feel sad or somber, or you have those emotions because of the tone he created. Okay. I think that I don't want to talk forever, so I want you to think about maybe just one more thing I wanted to talk about, because I talked about, let's look at parallelism, since we worked on that earlier in the year. And that's another strategy he uses here. I'm going to go to page 312 is where I have in my notes. And here, I want to go right here. So we talked about at the beginning, remember that parallelism, that's when it weaves through this. It can be that grammatical structure. If you remember, we did, we were working on Martin Luther King Jr.'s speech, and then we looked at some other speeches, but we were talking about how they use that even in what was I trying to think? The Declaration of Independence, right? And we talked about how these phrases get repeated, and the words might change, but that's that grammatical structure. He felt, so I'm going to talk about this. He felt time was running out. He was speaking rapidly. He wanted. His speech became confused. His voice was choked. He knew. He was. Now, normally, if we were writing, we would say, gosh, that's not very good sentence fluency, right? We want to change that up a little bit. We don't want to start it all the same. This is an intentional strategy. This is parallelism. He's using the same pronoun and he's using a verb after that. That's usually boom, boom. He felt, he was, he wanted, he knew, he was. That's intentional. He's driving that over and over again. They have the similar grammatical structure. the reason why he's doing this is because he's trying to create some suspense here. He's trying to really create this feeling of pressure and panic. He knew I had to leave in a few moments. He was going to remain alone, so alone. That's over and over and over again. That's building that sense of urgency. Mhm. So it's intentional here. Gosh, there's just so much I could talk about if we were in class today, but that's primarily what I want you to walk away with, is understand the difference between tone and mood, and then being able to find some examples of what the author does and how they actually use that tone, in their writing, and you can find some text evidence to prove that. So when you're ready to do the assignment, or if you've already done it, awesome. You can go out and you can always resume it if you need to. Remember, when you're working on those assignments, you can save them and work on them later. That's the nice thing about it. It's not one and done. I won't grade them until they're due. So this one's not due till tonight at 11:59. I'm not going to grade them till tomorrow. So if you need to make changes or you want to, fix some things or add some things, you can do that. I want to make sure that you understand you do need to be answering incomplete sentences. I went out and read a couple of them, and I can see you're not answering incomplete sentences. That is part of the directions. It is part of the points. So look very carefully. When you're writing, you should be writing incomplete sentences. Unless you're writing your own memoir and you're trying to create some of your own style and use and deliver your own tone, you need to be answering questions in complete sentences, just like we've practiced all year, just like you've done most of your educational life and you will continue to do. So go ahead and look at those. If you are not sure, click on this video right here. It says watch this video to see how to submit an assignment on Schoology. I will be available in office hours today. I look forward to talking to you about this piece of literature, about tone, about mood, just about a word choice, or anything at all that's going on in your life. So have a great day. Take care.